For me, the biggest learning is to be authentic. Don't try to be another person because people will see right through you. Care for the people that you're a leader for and your colleagues. People maybe don't like you. Of course, it's not nice, but that's reality, that's life. And I think care and listen, to be curious. What does the other person have to say is super important as a leader. I became a leader for people that I was a colleague to. That's always a peculiar situation. You've been used to sitting, talking at lunch about stuff that you do as colleagues. So I think that was a challenge. But when you grow into that role within a company, I think it's important to tread cautiously, and respectfully. I think one of the mistakes I did was to also, again, thinking now I need to know a lot of stuff and all that. At the same time, focusing on building boundaries for transformation and also creating and building a strong team. I think that was quite obvious for me. That was a mistake. Instead of just accepting, okay, you don't know that, you don't know that.
Welcome to the Patreon podcast. Here, there's no fluff and no sales pitches, just real conversations. I'm your host, Christy Christensen, and at Patreon, we bring together bold and curious founders and leaders to share their stories, their lessons they have learned, and the hard truth behind their success. We are all about challenging the status quo and explore fresh perspectives while focusing on what really matters: people. If you're craving deeper conversations, you're in the right space. So let's dive in. Thomas, thank you so much for joining the Patreon podcast. I have been looking forward to this dialogue. So just before we head in, thank you so much for taking the time to sit here with me.
Thank you, Christine. Thank you for having me. I've also looked forward to the chat. I think it's always nice to try and give a little back to others if possible.
And as you know, before we dive in, I ask each guest to share a bit of a fun fact about themselves to just help our listeners get a feel of who Thomas is as a person. So without further ado, Thomas, what's your fun fact?
I'll try to keep it short. I actually have two fun facts, so because that says who I am. So once I actually I played a football match and scored a goal in the National Stadium in Parken in a TV transmitted game.
Okay,
that's one fun fact. Yeah, and when it comes to football, you know, footballers always love tattoos. I love tattoos. I have quite a few myself, and I have a dream of getting my whole back tattooed with my life story. So that's a couple of fun facts. Yeah.
Wow, that's okay. That sounds expensive, first of all, and painful.
Probably is, yes, but but I think it's a fun fact because when people meet me, they don't think I'm the kind of person with tattoos. So
that's funny you say that, because that was exactly what I was thinking. It's like, I wouldn't have expected you having tattoos.
Yeah.
Very good.
There you go.
How many tattoos do you have?
Oh, right. I don't know, because some of them are mixed in together, and so actually I don't have the count. But yeah.
Awesome. And just so Parken, we are in Copenhagen, we're in Scandinavia, Denmark. Parken is like the biggest stadium, and you scored a goal there on live television, you say?
Yeah. It was, you remember, I can't remember the year, but there was this big tsunami that caused a lot of death and chaos around the world. And then there was a big TV show that gathered money for all that needed. So I worked at a place then, actually as a bartender, and the guy that had that venue bought one half of a TV transmitted game against a team called, I think it was Zulu. It was TV2 Zulu. It was like with people that couldn't really play football and stuff like that. So it was quite fun. There was actually, I think, a couple of thousand spectators and the national anthem and stuff like that. It It was fun.
I like that. And I'm gonna try and make a smooth transition here, but I don't think that's gonna be possible. So I'm just gonna change the topic completely.
Yeah,
So we wanted to talk about leadership and your role and your career and your journey as well. And I wanted to ask a bit about what are some of those big learnings throughout your career that you're taking with you in your career today?
Yeah, I think when it comes to leadership, for me, the biggest learning is to be authentic, actually. Don't try to be another person because that people will see right through you. I think just, and then care, actually. So care for the people that you're a leader for and your colleagues, basically. So an example is when you actually ask a person, how are you doing? Then don't let it be just a polite phrase. Actually care and listen. I think that's one of the biggest learnings I've taken with me. So and be aware that not everyone will like you as a leader. That's fair. Accept it, embrace it, and move on because you will not be able to get everybody on board when it comes to that, especially also when you talk about leadership and transformation scenarios. And so I think that's one of the biggest learnings. And it is to know that people maybe don't like you. Of course, it's not nice, but that's reality. That's life. Yeah. And I think care and listen, to be curious. What does the other person have to say is super important as a leader. And I can pivot that also into where I'm now in an IT consultancy firm, working with sales and engaging with new potential clients. Be curious, basically. It's all about the human connection. You have to have the right offerings and you have to be skilled, but it's about the human connection. Yeah.
Yeah. And, authenticity is I would say becoming a little bit of a buzzword in a way. What does that mean? What does authenticity mean for you?
For me, I mean, I know it's becoming maybe, and for me, it's been like, I don't know, I respect buzzwords and so on, but I think for me, it's just nice to see that what I've always been doing, of course, I've been learning over the years because I became a leader also in a younger age, so you learn. But for me, it's about, so who I am at home, that's also the same person I am at work. I'm open. I've always been very open also about my private life. We've also been talking, I have 2 kids with autism, and I've always been open with that throughout my career and just basically listened a lot also to the people that I've been fortunate to work with and actually care. So no bullshit kind of type. And when I say that, I don't mean like, I'm just barging out there and stuff like that, but actually what you see is what you get.
And now you mentioned you became a leader in a young age. What were some of those challenges and how did you overcome them throughout your career that you have taken with you today and learned from, and or perhaps you would do differently or do differently because of that experience in the past?
Yeah. First and foremost, I became a leader for people that I was a colleague to. That's one thing. And that's always that was my step into leadership. That's always, quite, peculiar situation, right? Because now you suddenly have a responsibility and also insights and stuff that maybe they don't. And you've been used to sitting, talking at lunch, about stuff that you do as colleagues. So I think that was a challenge. And I think the way I handled it was basically to not just go in there and change everything, basically. For one thing, because it was not needed. Second, I mean, just take it easy. You may now be a leader, but I mean, be respectful for the people that you've been uh, uh, in a team with, and just get a sense for where people are, and just talk with them, openly asking them, how do you feel about this, and how do we go about it in a good way, and that worked out quite good, and because when you come as a leader, often when you do a change in your career, go to another company, then as a leader you often change things when you come in, because that's probably also why you've been hired, right? But when you grow into that role within a company, I think it's important to tread cautiously, yeah, and respectfully.
And I hear this a lot as well when people are being promoted and are becoming a leader and taking responsibility for the team that they were sitting among before. What would you say, and what would you advise others that have recently made that step, or are in the process of it, or would like to make that move? What would you advise them to do and think in order for them to bring that team with them? Because I
Hmm.
think it would be inevitable that you would have some or a single person in that team that might also have wanted that job,
Yeah.
and might also be a bit of a not necessarily directly on your team, because they might be jealous, or they might think that you were not the right person for that role.
Yeah.
How do you tackle that, and what would you advise others to think about?
I think a good thing is always to, do a list. I like lists, right? Pros and cons and stuff like that. And but look at yourself. So you would probably know this going into the role, I would guess. So do a list. I would say focus what's your own strength, what's your own weaknesses as a leader, and how would you actually put that person that might be the jealous one, or the one that also wanted the job, how do you actually put that person into play in the best possible way in a scenario like that? And then accept also that I have a strong opinion about leadership, and I think leadership is such an important role that I'm not a fan of, the the playing coach. So if you're a leader, don't have a lot of projects yourself. I mean, focus on the leadership. Maybe get them to the person that actually also wanted the job. So that is a way to make that person feel still important, of course, because you could argue that that person might see it as a some sort of defeat, and so I think that is the way. Focus on that. Focus on making sure that the team you have is actually have the strength that you don't have as a leader. I think that's super important, and be aware of that as a leader. You don't have to be the best at what you do, but you have to be the best leader.
Mm, yeah. And from my own experience as well with exactly this situation of someone perhaps not being on your team from day one, uh, what you said there around authenticity and honesty and openness and no bullshit in a way, right?
Hmm.
Having those almost like clean the air really quickly, very like almost first
Yeah,
day,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
because all those misunderstandings or what have might have had dialogues with others that are outside of your responsibility, you can't really take on those dialogues. That's not a
No, no,
dialogue with you.
no.
So that's just one thing that I did. I had that very honest and open dialogue on day one and cleaned the air. And it really changed that dynamic
Yeah,
between us, and also helped just have a clean slate from day one. So you don't have any heritage or being almost looked at as a representative of those other conversations that you had nothing to do with.
yeah, 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 exactly.
Yeah. Now, when you mentioned about leadership and also bringing people with you and helping people grow, and the aspect of you as a leader should not necessarily be the most clever or the strongest at all skills, but that you should lean on leadership. What's your advice for others, or how have you come to that realization yourself? Because I think that's one of the aspects of leadership that are, or perhaps some are leaning into it and others would like to still be the best at all the skills and disciplines. Like, what has your experience been in that?
First of all, there's no complete perfect scenario, and there's no truth to one right solution, right? But I really believe in, if you want to be the best at what you do, taking aside the leadership, I will foresee that you will have a hard time succeeding as a leader, to be honest, because it requires a lot to be a leader. So that's one thing. And I think for me, the biggest realization about that was when I did change after being in the same company for 40 years. Stepping up in a bigger role for at another company, that's one thing. But coming from a place where you know so much to a place where you know way less, I think one of the mistakes I did in that transition was to also, again, thinking now I need to know a lot of stuff and all that. At the same time, focusing on building boundaries for transformation, and also creating and building a strong team. I think that was quite obvious for me that was a mistake to focus on that. Also getting to know, and instead of just accepting, okay, you don't know that, you don't know this, it's also perfectly fine because you have a strong team. So I would really recommend to focus on building and having and nurturing a strong, diverse team with different skill sets as a leader.
And now when you mentioned about transformation, can you tell us a little bit more about bringing or carrying a team through a transformation and your experiences on that?
As a leader, not everyone will like you, and it's the same with the transformation. I think what's important in a transformation and in terms of leadership is to have, depending on size, of course, of the company, but a few strong ambassadors from leadership roles going into that transformation, creating a story. It's about storytelling, right? I think storytelling is important in a lot of scenarios: leadership, selling, sales, and again, transformation. Create a story. I mean, don't be afraid of actually talking about, if we, let's say, just plain and simple, if we don't do this, we're out of business in 5 years. Just an example. It's perfectly fine to build that scenario because that will give you the momentum you need to pick up the transformation. Get going. Don't overplan. Of course, you need to do some sort of planning and that, but get going, fail fast, learn and adapt, and then as you go, focus on storytelling. Then you will see that you will get more and more people on board, and the people that you will never get on board, they will disappear, and accept that. I think that's important in transformations. There's not many, really, to be honest, big transformation that actually succeeds. I think the number is quite low. So I think that's important.
Why do you think that they don't succeed? What is it that you think are missing, or why do you think that these transformation projects fail?
If you look at, big, well-established companies trying to do transformations, I think we all know that change is one of the hardest things to do for a human being. And if you don't accelerate the transformation, accept cuts in earnings, and if you don't rush it, to be honest. And when I say rush, it's not about doing like just running into it with your head under your arm, right? But actually having the sense of urgency, and then do the proper storytelling, create the story. And I think if you can bind it on customer experience being lifted, etc., then you are in a better place. So I think where they fail is where they fail to keep going when it gets tough, keep the storytelling going, and keep onboarding and getting ambassadors for the transformation on board. I think that's why it's super hard for many people when it gets tough. Okay, maybe it was not the right decision. Maybe we need to, and then yeah. So I think that's why change. Have a lot of focus on the change part because it's super hard for people to change.
Yeah. And now when you're saying storytelling carries a lot of weight, do you have a framework or a process or structure that you lean towards or you think about when it comes to creating storytelling and recruit ambassadors and make sure that that train of transformation keeps moving forward?
I don't have a particular framework, to be honest. I'm a pragmatic guy, so I like to pick and choose bits and pieces. Going back to leadership, being authentic, being honest, being brave, being vulnerable, will carry you a lot of the way. Um, and making sure, I mean, you know, when you want to embark this, you know who are the carriers of the company culture. Make sure you have sit downs and talks with the right leaders in the right areas where it's most important before you start, and get a feel for where they are. Are they on board? Are they not on board? If they're not on board, I mean, you have to be a bit brutal, to be honest, because you need the people in the right places to be on board from the beginning, and then, I mean, there's a bigger chance more will follow.
Hmm. Is it like, focus on those that are your early adopters per se, and those who might be slower in adopting and coming on board might actually be convinced over time, and then those that are just not convinced and or don't trust or don't believe that this is the right project or being carried out in the right way, those you should just not focus on, or should you still focus on trying to convince them?
No. Leave them, to be honest. And I know it can sound brutal because that's, I mean, as a leader, not really who I am, but if you focus solely on the transformation scenario, you have to also be realistic. As a leader, you have a certain role to make sure that the company succeeds, but you also have a role to actually care for the people that you're a leader for.
And
Yeah.
I wanted to pick up on something you spoke about a bit earlier, which is around the team, how to establish a good team and build a good team culture, and also help them thrive and not being carried away like you are the best at all disciplines as well as leadership.
That's a really good question. I think, first of all, it is super important. I always look at my team as a football team. I love football, you know. But so uh, and being a coach of a football team is different than being the attacker that scores a goal or whatever. But making sure that you look at it as a football team, that's how I do it, and say, I need to have different profiles to create a strong team. Do not make the classic mistake and hire someone like yourself. Don't go there. That's one. And make sure, actually, when you do build the team, make sure that people are different, have different strengths, and don't be afraid of that. Don't be afraid of actually also the team ending up in discussions because they are different. But make sure you facilitate it in a good way. It's a balance because it can also pivot into something really ugly. But try and exploit that advantage in the diversity of the team. And then for me, it's about making sure they have the boundaries, and I need to protect them where they need to be protected. I need to push them where they need to be pushed. Make sure you're aware that you actually know your team members, because people need different things. Some people might just need a shoulder to lean on, and I have this, and often I've been sitting in a situation where I've heard, somebody being annoyed with something, and I'm saying, in the end, I'm always saying, I understand, I hear what you say. So do you need me to do anything? And then often I actually get the response, no, it's fine. I can handle myself, but they actually just needed to get it out there. Don't try to solve everything for them. Make sure you solve the right things. And you do that by being curious and asking questions.
And now you also say about asking questions and listen and active listening, which is also one thing that I have been training and are very aware of. What would your advice be to make sure that you as a leader are listening to your team and you're actually actively listening? How do you go about that?
I think for me, it's about looking the person in the eyes, giving hints that I'm actually listening along the way, not just like, but again, questions along the way, being curious, because that proves that you're actually listening to what they're saying.
And I think it just out of from my own experience, it might be a silly thing, but actually, I think many of us do it without perhaps really realizing it. But multitasking, and you cannot multitask while you're actively listening. It's
No.
impossible. And I think just one of the things that I have done is literally just nothing else matters than that single conversation, just like the conversation you and I have right now. I'm not doing anything else. I'm not trying to think about anything else but your words. And it's actually draining, but it's a great exercise because you realize you get more out of that conversation as well. But when you have a meeting or when someone wants to speak to you, just focus 100% on their words and what they say and their body language if you're there in person. Because the other person can feel it as well. If you're thinking about the next meeting or you're thinking about that email you were just about to send, or then it's better to perhaps also say, actually, it's not right time right now for me. Can we reconnect later? So you make that space for you to active listen to what the other person has to say.
Yeah. And put your phone in a box if you're like kind of a person that cannot leave it.
Yeah, exactly.
I agree.
As we are looking at lessons learned throughout your career and your own experience as a leader, what is the three pieces of advice you would give someone who are in a leadership position about to go through a digital transformation or transformation of their team or their organization?
I would say pre-mortem. That's a very strong exercise. So now we're imagining how the transformation went wrong. So why did it go wrong? Then I would say don't hide things, don't sugarcoat things, be honest, because people will look through bullshit. And then I would say make sure that people know what they're accountable for. So you can do a RD or whatever you want to do, but in a broader scale, actually, it's the same with meetings. When you go, we do have too many meetings. Let's just be honest. But when you go out of a meeting, make sure that people know who does what. I mean, what decisions have you taken, and who needs to do what? Follow up. Yeah. So I think those are areas that I would make sure I in place or do types of exercises.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and on the meeting point, I think we can all agree that there's way too many meetings for the sake of having a meeting, but also like having a simple agenda, like why are we here in the first place? What are we trying to get out of it? And then to your point, who does what? What's the outcome? What's the next steps?
Meetings without an agenda should be illegal, right?
Yeah, they should be banned.
Yeah,
Totally a waste of time.
I agree.
We have talked a little bit in the past, you and I, about the younger generation coming into the workforce, and also from my peers having discussions about how do you meet them, and how do they also challenge the workspace and the work environment, and perhaps the rules, and challenge the old ways of going into the office from remote working, but also to your earliest question, like ask how people are. I've heard out in my network that the younger generation, the Gen Zs and so on, they get offended by that question.
Well, I just sometimes I just love the way we talk about generations, and if you look at it on a really broad scale, it's I mean, going through history, it's of course things change, but I mean, from one generation to the next, the difference is actually not that big. I think you can learn a lot from younger people. I think life is a constant learning lesson in many ways. And you say that you've heard that they get offended by that question. I think the reason they do is because it's when they are asked the question by a person that actually don't really mean it. Do you know what I understand? Not really interested. It's like there's this commercial when a person asks someone in the elevator, "How are you doing?" and then he just spills out, "I'm doing so bad," and stuff like that. And then the person is like, "Yeah, but you did ask the question, right?
Yeah.
So now I'm giving you the answer." So if they don't feel that it's you know, you're really asking the question, I understand why they get offended. I think that's the case because when it all comes to it, I mean, people like that other people care for them. No questions asked. I'm 100% convinced on that. So I'm not that scared. And when it comes to remote work and all that stuff, I think again I'm a pragmatic type. I know that from questionnaires actually where the thrive is the highest is actually where people are at work at the office. And next after that, it's the combo with 1 to 2 work days from home. So just be aware that I know it's good to have the flexibility, and that's why I'm pragmatic. Make sure that you have the flexibility, but be very aware in how you actually would encourage people and talk about why it's good to be at the office, because that is the highest percentage of drive. Um, as I saw recently in IT Job Bank's survey. So I think that's super important to understand. And actually, the more you work from home, the less you drive. And I know then there will be a person saying, "Yeah, but I love being home all the time." That's fair. But looking at the broader scale, that's the statistics. So make sure I think you give the flexibility. You talk in a positive manner on why you actually want people to be at the office to promote a good working culture, office culture, and don't be like this micromanaging type of person.
What are some good storytelling that has been told in order to get people back into work more so than just saying it's a rule?
I'm not sure I've seen scenarios where it's been delivered in a good way. I think video technology is the ones that do this cameras that records for example, football, doing a lot about promoting the office culture, but still with the flexibility. And I think just don't make it a rule. And I know it's different because it depends on what kind of company you are, what do you do, what's your role, etc. But don't make it a rule. I mean, I've been nurturing and speaking for working from home since way before COVID, because it's about looking in a holistic way. Where are people in their life journey? Okay, so now I need to be home because I have a plumber coming, or shoot, my kid was sick. Instead of having a sick day, I do a work from home and stuff like that. So I think that's the way you need to go about it. Don't make rules.
If we were to switch gears as we are kind of moving towards the end of our dialogue, I love looking at being challenged and challenge people's perspective. Who do you follow, or are you looking towards these days that inspire and challenge your view, Thomas?
That's quite a few, right? But I think Casper from Clever is someone that I'm inspired by, and I think have doing an important job when it comes to how you can structure a company, and I think it's inspiring to see that you can. It's not that I have to say that I still believe in strong leadership, and I know they look at it in a way with flavors. So I don't think their model will just be suitable for everyone. But I think, I mean, as a shift, focusing on the person and the thrive, and looking at it in a holistic way. Also, I love that he says that it's not always all about making money. You have a responsibility as a company in society for the people. Um, so I think he's inspiring, to be honest. Yeah.
What would you like to see change in the coming year when it comes to corporations and businesses and leadership?
I think I would like to see that they take bigger responsibility from a socioeconomic perspective. And I would love to see embracing AI, but in a way where it's not about tweaking the last cent out of the margin, but actually utilize also AI to make better products, to make the workday better for the employees, instead of just tweaking a cent out of the margin, to be honest. I think we are in a challenged position in the world where a large portion of the money is on so few hands. So I would love to see some changes there.
Last question before we wrap up. Who has been some of the leaders throughout your career, or a leader through your career, that have made a deep and profounding impression on you?
I thought a lot about this, and then actually I didn't, because I think it was quite obvious for me that I was fortunate enough to have the same leader at the company where I worked for 40 years. I had the same leader, I think, 12 of those years. And so it has to be Jesper Larsen, my leader from that time. Sometimes you just, you hit that combo at that particular time in your career that makes sense. And I went through also the personal stuff with the having kids with autism and all that. I mean, which is a tough period when you go through when they get the dinos and all that. But she actually set the boundaries for me to being able to build a career at the same time handling that in my private life. So there's no doubt that has to be him.
And do you see that he's caring for you and helping you in that sense with your situation with your kids and so on. Do you see that influenced the way that you lead today with everything you've talked about through this podcast session?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think already before that, I think it was quite obvious that I would be the same kind of leader. But of course, I mean, seeing that leaders in a position like that, being like that, of course, supported that journey for me and inspired me also, for sure.
Fantastic. I love that, that the dialogue we've had about honesty and authenticity and leadership, and that you can be loved by everyone. I think there are so many nuggets in here, and I really appreciate your time once again, Thomas, for taking the time to join us here at the Pantheon podcast. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Christine. Thank you for letting me in and speaking. That was really nice.
If this episode gave you something to think about, I'll be really grateful if you could share this with your LinkedIn network. And to make sure you don't miss out on any new episodes, simply follow Patreon wherever you are listening or watching. And just a note, the opinions and views shared by our guests are entirely their own and don't necessarily represent the businesses they work for. We really hope you enjoyed this episode. Until next time, bye for now.